You are born on September 7, 1533, in the gilded chambers of Greenwich Palace. Your mother is Anne Boleyn, second wife to King Henry VIII, and already one of the most controversial women in all of England. Your father wanted a son, a male heir who would secure the Tudor line. Instead, he gets you. From the moment you're wrapped in royal linens, you are already a disappointment to your father and a political weapon to your enemies. At first, you're declared a princess, with all the pomp and privilege expected of a royal birth. You're given your own household, servants and staff. Your mother, Anne, proudly shows you off to the court, but this early glory is short-lived. Within 3 years, your world collapses. In 1536, your mother is arrested, accused of adultery, incest, and treason, charges most historians believe were fabricated to make way for her replacement, Jane Seymour. You're not even old enough to understand the charges, but the result is brutal. Your mother is executed by sword. The same man who fathered you ordered her death. And just like that, you go from Princess Elizabeth to Lady Elizabeth. Your title stripped. Your legitimacy erased by a royal decree. You're still the king's daughter, but not a recognized heir. You are a royal in limbo. Your early years are unstable. You are shuffled from household to household, first Hatfield, then Enfield, then various estates of minor nobility. Though you are now officially illegitimate, you are still Tudor blood. And that matters. You're educated alongside other high-born children, but few receive the intensity of training you do. Your tutors aren't just educators, they are political fireproofing. Roger Ascham, your most famous tutor, ensures you become fluent in Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. You study theology, history, logic, and philosophy. You master rhetoric and poise. You don't just learn to survive, you learn to outthink everyone else. Your governess, Kat Ashley, becomes one of your earliest and most loyal allies. She doesn't treat you as a fallen princess, she treats you as a future queen. By the time you are 10 years old, you are already reading Cicero and translating classical texts into English. And here's something most people don't know. Your education wasn't just designed to make you learned, it was designed to make you dangerous. A woman with your mind could never rely on brute force to wield power. You had to master subtlety, wit, strategy. Language would be your sword and armor. Meanwhile, your family drama never stops. After your mother's death, your father marries 4 more times. You witness the arrival and departure, sometimes by death, of stepmothers. Some are kind to you, like Catherine Parr, who treats you almost as her own. Others view you as a liability, a reminder of the king's most controversial marriage. But Catherine Parr gives you something more than kindness, she gives you a window into court politics. When Henry dies in 1547, and your younger half-brother Edward becomes king at age 9, Catherine marries Thomas Seymour, the brother of the former Queen Jane Seymour. You are brought into their household, and for the first time, you experience something even more treacherous than palace intrigue, attention. Thomas Seymour, nearly 40 and married, begins showing an inappropriate interest in you. Morning visits to your room, tickling games, cutting your clothes in jest. You are only 14, it's uncomfortable, dangerous, and politically explosive. When Catherine Parr dies during childbirth, Thomas Seymour turns his attention fully on you, going as far as to propose marriage. You decline. You don't just survive the scandal, you maneuver through it. When Seymour is arrested for treason a year later, you are interrogated for weeks. For hours at a time, men grill you about your relationship with him. Your responses are sharp, guarded, deliberate. You are not yet queen, but already you act like one. At 15, you emerge from that investigation with your reputation intact, a miracle in a court that feasts on female scandal. Meanwhile, your half-brother King Edward is growing ill, and your half-sister Mary, the Catholic daughter of Catherine of Aragon, is waiting in the wings. Religious tension is simmering. The country is split between Protestant reformers and Catholic loyalists. You're caught in the middle, trying to remain neutral, cautious, calculating. When Edward dies in 1553, Protestant advisors try to bypass both you and Mary by installing Lady Jane Grey, another Tudor relative, as queen. It doesn't work. Mary takes the throne, deposes Jane, and within days you are under scrutiny again. Mary is paranoid, and for good reason. You are young, Protestant, brilliant, and a legitimate threat to her rule. When rebellions break out, most notably Wyatt's rebellion in 1554, you are implicated without evidence. Mary sends you to the Tower of London. You enter through Traitor's Gate, the same stone arch where condemned prisoners pass on their way to execution. You don't if you still leave alive. You spend weeks in the tower. Guards monitor your every move. You write letters to Mary proclaiming your innocence. You walk the courtyard under a gray sky, never knowing if the axe will fall. You pray. You plot. You wait. Eventually, Mary decides to release you. There's not enough evidence to kill you. But you're exiled to Hatfield House under surveillance, forced to live quietly while Mary rules. Still, the queen has no heir, and as her health deteriorates, her advisors begin turning their eyes to you. You bide your time. You know that if you can survive Mary's reign, your moment will come. You are not yet queen, but you are poised, prepared, and perfectly positioned. This was your childhood, born into scandal, raised in exile, forged by fire. It sits November 17, 1558. You're at Hatfield House when the news reaches you. Queen Mary is dead. England has no monarch, and you, once declared illegitimate, once imprisoned in the Tower, once one whisper away from execution, are now Queen of England. You walk out into the winter morning, your breath curling in the air, and say a prayer in Latin under the oak trees. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. You are 25 years old, you've never led an army, you've never held a court office, and now you sit on the most dangerous throne in Europe. And make no mistake, it is dangerous. England is broke. The country is divided by religion. Your navy is outdated. You are surrounded by enemies abroad. Catholic France to the south, Spain to the west, and Scotland to the north, whose queen, Mary Stuart, already has a better claim to your throne in the eyes of many Catholics. At home, you are a Protestant queen in a kingdom traumatized by Mary's persecution of reformers. And to top it all off, you are a woman, and no woman has ever ruled England in her own right without a husband. Your advisors want answers. Will you marry? Who will be your consort? Will you restore Catholicism? Will you avenge the Protestants Mary burned? Will you ally with Spain, with France, with anyone? Your answer? You stall. You smile. You delay. You do what you've learned to do best. Wait for your moment. But one thing is immediate. Your coronation. You are crowned on January 15, 1559 in Westminster Abbey. The ceremony is a carefully staged balancing act, Catholic ritual, Protestant scripture, and just enough symbolism to keep the peace. You sit on the coronation chair, hold the orb and scepter, and receive the crown. You are no longer Lady Elizabeth, you are Elizabeth Regina. Behind the scenes, you move quickly. You form your first Privy Council, a small elite group of advisors. You appoint William Cecil, your most trusted ally, as principal secretary. He is sharp, experienced, and loyal. You give him clear instructions, this judgment I have of you, that you will not be corrupted by any manner of gift, and that you will be faithful to the state. Cecil will serve you for 4 decades. But you also know politics isn't just about wise counsel, it's about appearances. So you begin to craft your image. Not just as queen, but as something more. You know what they expect of you, a royal marriage, an heir, a king beside you. You give them none of it. You declare, publicly and deliberately, that you have no desire to marry yet, and when Parliament begins to press you for a match, you reply with a smile, I am already bound unto a husband, which is the kingdom of England. But here's something few know, you did consider marriage many times. Dozens of suitors court you, from Philip II of Spain to Archduke Charles of Austria. You even entertained marriage negotiations with Eric XIV of Sweden and with the French prince, Francois, Duke of Anjou. But every time you walk away, not out of fear. Out of strategy. You use marriage as a bargaining chip, flirting diplomatically with kings, dangling alliances, playing factions against each other. You don't reject marriage, you weaponize it. Meanwhile, you tackle the elephant in the room, religion. The country is fractured after years of violent reform and persecution. Your half-sister Mary restored Catholicism with fire and blood. Before her, your father split with Rome to marry your mother. Now it's your move. You enact the Elizabethan religious settlement, a series of laws that re-establish Protestantism but stop short of Puritan extremes. You make yourself Supreme Governor of the Church of England, a title carefully chosen to avoid offending those who still revere the Pope. The new Book of Common Prayer walks a tightrope, enough Protestant content to satisfy reformers, but familiar language and rituals to appease traditionalists. You don't want zealots. You want peace. But peace doesn't come easily. In 1560, your cousin and greatest rival, Mary Stuart, known as Mary, Queen of Scots, returns to Scotland. She is young, Catholic, and widowed from the French king, and she begins calling herself the rightful Queen of England. You don't set act yet. You watch, wait, learn. You are building something bigger than a monarchy. You are building a myth. You begin touring the country, royal progresses that take you from manor to manor, castle to town, cathedral to countryside. These are not vacations. They are strategy. You show your face to the people. You let them see the Virgin Queen. You connect with them directly, skipping traditional royal aloofness and creating a kind of political intimacy. At court, you surround yourself with loyal nobles and cultivated flatterers. You elevate the Dudleys, the Cecils, the Howards. You reward loyalty and punish defiance. But the man closest to you, the one who causes the most gossip and speculation, is Robert Dudley. Handsome, bold, ambitious. You knew him since childhood, and now, as queen, you make him your master of the horse, giving him constant access to you. The court whispers endlessly. Are you in love? Are you lovers? Then in 1560, Dudley's wife, Amy Robsart, is found dead under suspicious circumstances, her neck broken at the bottom of a staircase. Officially ruled an accident, but the damage is done. The idea of marrying Dudley becomes politically toxic. And so, as always, you don't deny, you don't confirm, you don't explain. You remain above the storm, untouched by scandal, yet never too far from it. Your court begins to flourish, not just in politics but in culture. You sponsor musicians, painters, playwrights. You invite poets to craft verses in your honor. You commission portraits that exaggerate your youth, your power, your majesty. You are no longer just Elizabeth. You are Gloriana, the fairy queen, the virgin monarch, not born to rule, but built for it. This was your ascension, not just to the throne, but to legend. The crown rests on your head, but it's never light. From the moment you take the throne, you know peace is an illusion. You are not only England's queen, you are a Protestant woman ruling a divided kingdom in a world that still believes a woman alone cannot rule, and that Protestantism is heresy. You don't just have political rivals, you have ideological enemies, and they don't sit quietly. First, the North. Scotland is in religious and political turmoil. Your cousin Mary Stuart, Mary Queen of Scots, is back on her native throne after her husband, the French king, dies suddenly. She's young, Catholic, and widely seen by Europe's Catholic powers as the true Queen of England. After all, in their eyes, you are illegitimate, born from Henry VIII's heretical divorce and the execution of Anne Boleyn. Mary refuses to renounce her claim. She marries Lord Darnley, a man who also has Tudor blood, strengthening her line. But their marriage collapses into scandal and violence. In 1567, Darnley is found murdered in a garden after an explosion. Mary's next move is catastrophic. She marries the man everyone believes killed her husband, James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell. The Scottish nobles rebel. Mary is captured and forced to abdicate in favor of her infant son, James VI. She escapes, crosses the border into England, seeking your protection. And now, the most dangerous political question of your reign lands on your doorstep. What do you do with a deposed queen, Catholic, and rival to your throne? You don't kill her. Not yet. But you don't welcome her either. You place her under house arrest, shifting her between castles and noble estates. She writes letters. She conspires. She plays the long game, just like you. Meanwhile, to the west, another threat grows: Philip II of Spain. Philip was once married to your sister Mary. During her reign, he held the title of King of England. Now under your rule, he watches with disdain as Protestantism spreads and England begins quietly aiding the Protestant Dutch rebels in their fight against Spanish rule. Spain is the superpower of Europe. Its empire stretches across oceans, its armadas rule the seas, and Philip sees your reign not just as a nuisance, but as a direct challenge to Catholicism itself. Then comes 1570. A single piece of parchment changes everything. Pope Pius V issues a papal bull, Regnans in Excelsis, officially excommunicating you. He declares you a heretic and releases all your subjects from obedience to your rule. In one stroke, you are now fair game, not just politically, but religiously. This isn't just symbolic, it's a loaded gun handed to your enemies. Overnight, being Catholic in England becomes a liability. Loyalty is questioned. Priests are hunted. Conspiracies begin bubbling beneath the surface. In 1571, one of them boils over: the Ridolfi plot. A Florentine banker named Roberto Ridolfi coordinates a plan to assassinate you, put Mary Stuart on the throne, and marry her to the Duke of Norfolk. The plan involves Spanish troops landing on English shores. You move fast. The plot is exposed. The Duke of Norfolk is arrested and executed. Ridolfi flees. Mary, still under your watch, pleads innocence, but you know the web of betrayal is tightening. You respond with laws, more severe, more targeted. Catholic priests are declared traitors. Harboring them becomes a capital offense. You don't want to persecute, but you will if it keeps the crown on your head and the knife out of your back. Meanwhile, the war with Spain simmers. You still avoid open conflict, but you allow English privateers, essentially pirates with government permission, to raid Spanish treasure ships. Men like John Hawkins and Francis Drake grow rich plundering gold from the Americas. Philip fumes. Drake becomes a national hero. You knight him on the deck of his ship. It's a message: England is rising, and so are you. But you know something else, this can't last forever. The balance is shifting, you are surrounded. To the north, a rival queen with a stronger claim than yours. To the west, Spain, enraged and plotting invasion. To the south, France, watching, calculating, waiting for weakness. And at home, loyalists to Rome, ready to act the moment they see an opening. You begin preparing in silence. You bolster your coastal defenses, you rebuild the navy, you fund espionage networks, led by your spy master Sir Francis Walsingham, to infiltrate plots, intercept messages, and unmask traitors. You don't trust easily, and you trust no one completely. You write letters late into the night, you study reports, you circle names, you read the faces of your court like a chessboard. And you never stop watching Mary Stuart. This is not a peaceful reign, this is survival. You are not just a monarch, you are a mark. A target, a queen ringed by enemies. But you are still on the throne, and your enemies are not. This was your tightening world, one conspiracy at a time. You've ruled for over a decade now. By the late 1570s, you've seen enough to know one thing: your enemies no longer wear armor. They wear robes, they carry prayer books, they speak in coded letters passed through couriers, nuns, and double agents. To the public, you are Gloriana, the regal, untouchable virgin queen. But behind the mask and pearls, you're playing a much more dangerous game. Survival, not on the battlefield, but in the corridors, confessionals, and candlelit parlors where whispers can kill. You need a weapon more powerful than swords or ships. You need a spy network. So you empower a man who already moves like a ghost through court, Francis Walsingham. Under his direction, you create a web of surveillance stretching across Europe. Walsingham isn't charming like Cecil. He isn't poetic like your noblemen. He's precise. A surgeon in the shadows. As your principal secretary, he becomes the architect of the most advanced intelligence system England has ever seen. Agents are embedded in every port city, embassy, and royal household. Catholic seminaries in Rome and Douai are infiltrated. Letters are intercepted. Priests are tracked. Codebreakers work tirelessly to decode plots. Even your own courtiers, those who dine at your table, are sometimes followed. One of Walsingham's greatest tools, false plots. He allows conspiracies to form, then lets them run long enough to ensnare every traitor. One by one, they reveal themselves, thinking they're safe. They never are. Still alive, still imprisoned, still dangerous. But the crown jewel of this shadow war, Mary Stuart? In 1586, Walsingham sets the perfect trap. He intercepts a letter written in cipher, hidden in a beer barrel cork. It's addressed to a Catholic nobleman named Anthony Babington. Inside, it lays out a plan to assassinate you, free Mary, and restore Catholic rule. For years, she's kept under heavy guard, moved from castle to castle. Yet the Catholic world treats her like a queen in exile. Messages are smuggled in and out, hidden in wine barrels, sewn into clothing, disguised in codes invisible to the naked eye. Mary replies. Her letter is cautious, but it's enough. The Babington plot is blown wide open. Walsingham presents the evidence to you. It's not just hearsay, it's ink on parchment, signed in Mary's own hand. You don't set act immediately. You summon your counselors, you summon your lawyers, you summon your soul. You've resisted this decision for over 18 years. You didn't want blood on your hands. You knew executing a fellow monarch, your cousin, would echo through Europe. But you also know this: as long as Mary lives, your life hangs by a thread. The trial is held at Fotheringhay Castle. You delay again. You hesitate. You sign the warrant but hold it back. Mary refuses to recognize the court's authority, but the evidence is irrefutable. The sentence is passed. Death. Mary is led to the scaffold in a red petticoat, the color of Catholic martyrdom. She kneels, prays, forgives her executioner. The axe falls, and with it, one of the most dangerous chapters of your reign ends. Eventually, your council acts without waiting for final word. The execution takes place on February 8, 1587. But the consequences are immediate. Europe erupts in outrage. You didn't just kill a rival, you killed a queen. For the Catholic monarchs of Europe, especially Philip II of Spain, this is an act of tyranny, of heresy, of war. Philip begins assembling the most terrifying fleet Europe has ever seen, the Spanish Armada. Back in London, you don't wait. You mobilize your advisors, your admirals, your commanders. You order the construction of coastal beacons, militia musters, artillery positioning. You prepare your nation for invasion. You address your people. But you also do something else, something your enemies never expect. In 1588, as the Armada approaches, you ride to Tilbury in full armor. You stand before your assembled troops, many of them poor farmers and merchants turned soldiers, and deliver a speech that will echo for centuries. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king and of a king of England too. You are no longer the girl in exile, no longer the reluctant queen, you are the shield of England. It's not just rhetoric, it's theater, it's politics, it's genius. Walsingham's network continues its silent war. Spies report ship movements. Scouts intercept coded messages. Sabotage unfolds in foreign ports. English privateers, led by Sir Francis Drake, strike Spanish supply lines with devastating precision. The Navy, under Charles Howard and Drake, uses fireships and faster, more maneuverable vessels to outflank and scatter the Spanish fleet. A storm later called the Protestant Wind finishes the job. When the Armada finally arrives, they find not a fractured kingdom, but a nation ready. The people rejoice, portraits are commissioned, coins are minted, poets immortalize the moment. You have not just survived, you have humiliated the most powerful empire in the world. The Armada limps back to Spain, broken and bloodied. But you return to court, to paperwork, to espionage, to strategy. Because you know the war never truly ends, not in your world. You've faced down rebellions, survived assassination plots, crushed a rival queen, and humiliated Spain's invincible armada. You're still standing, still ruling, still undefeated. Now comes the next move, not military, but symbolic. Because you understand something most monarchs never grasp. If they worship the idea of you, they'll never question your power. And so begins the birth of Gloriana. You've already laid the groundwork, the pearls, the stiff white gowns, the carefully curated portraits, but now, with your enemies weakened and your reign secure, you take it further. You become untouchable. Iconic. Eternal. Your face no longer ages in official portraits. Your skin becomes marble white, powdered and luminous. Your hairline is raised to create an exaggerated forehead, a Renaissance ideal of wisdom and clarity. You wear elaborate ruffs, golden armor in some depictions, and jewels that sparkle like miniature crowns. These aren't vanity choices, these are statecraft. You are creating a brand. Every brushstroke is calculated. The Ditchley portrait, the Rainbow portrait, the Armada portrait, each one packed with coded messages. Globes, eyes, suns, roses, serpents, everything means something. You are the ruler of the waves, the guardian of virtue, the divine queen sent by Providence. And the people believe it. Artists, poets, playwrights, courtiers all contribute to this expanding mythos. You are not just the monarch, they begin to call you Gloriana, Astrea, the fairy queen. Edmund Spenser writes, the fairy queen, casting you as a shining, near-divine force of purity and strength. Theaters swell with dramas celebrating loyalty, power, and English greatness. Every play staged under your watch is another feather in your crown. And yes, you patronize the arts, but you also censor them. No play, poem, or pamphlet gets wide circulation unless it serves the crown. Satirists disappear. Print shops are raided. You understand that culture isn't just entertainment, it's influence. You are not just shaping how they see you, you are shaping what they believe about monarchy itself. You command loyalty through language. You give speeches that electrify crowds, not with fire and fury, but with poise and precision. You write letters that disarm enemies and bind allies. Foreign envoys write home baffled by your command of Latin, your sharp wit, your impossible ability to dominate every room you enter. But even myths have to walk among mortals. And in your court, the dance never stops. Your inner circle, your trusted nobles and companions, is a garden of roses hiding thorns. Every smile hides a calculation. Every compliment masks an ambition. Jealousy festers in private chambers, and you are the sun they orbit, basking in your favor and terrified of your glare. Your suitors are long gone, you never married, you never named an heir. Instead, you remain singular, celibate, at least in the eyes of your subjects. Robert Dudley dies in 1588, the same year as the Armada, and you lock yourself away in grief. His stepson, the dashing Earl of Essex, tries to fill the void, but his ambition outpaces his loyalty. Essex is bold, brash, and dangerously charismatic. You favor him, you elevate him, and then, inevitably, he betrays you. In 1601, he leads a rebellion, small, poorly organized, but still a direct challenge to your crown. You don't hesitate, you arrest him, try him, and then you sign his death warrant. When he's executed, the people gasp, not because he was innocent, but because they thought your affection would spare him. It doesn't. You're still queen. And queens do not forgive treason. Your public image remains pristine, but privately, the weight of decades begins to show. You grow older, slower, melancholy creeps in. You lose many of your closest allies, Cecil, Walsingham, Dudley. Parliament becomes more demanding. Court factions sharpen their knives. The world is changing, and though your myth endures, your body betrays you. You avoid mirrors, you wear wigs to hide thinning hair. Your teeth rot from years of sugar. You rarely sleep. Some nights, you sit motionless in your palace, refusing food, refusing rest, lost in memory. But you will not surrender the throne. You will not name a successor. To name an heir is to invite ambition, to signal an end, and you have built a life by avoiding both. So, you rule and rule. Until the very last breath. This was your transformation, not into a leader, but into a legend. For over 4 decades, you've held the throne with a grip no rebellion, no foreign army, no papal edict could loosen. Your image, crafted in marble, gold, and verse, is one of permanence, of immortal sovereignty. But deep down, you know better. You feel it in your joints, in the court's whispers, in the way your courtiers look a little longer when they bow, as if reading your face for signs of the end. You have outlived almost everyone who mattered. William Cecil, your counselor, your spine, is dead. Walsingham, your spy master, gone. Robert Dudley, your closest friend and perhaps your one true love, buried. Even Mary, Queen of Scots, whom you once feared more than any woman on earth, now rests in the soil of England, beheaded by your order, yet strangely ever present in the conversation about what comes next. And that sips the problem. You never named a successor. Not out of indecision, but strategy. To name an heir while you live is to invite plotting, factions, and impatience. You learn that watching others fall. If people think your successor is already chosen, they'll start thinking of you in the past tense. So for decades, you said nothing. But the question never went away. It lingered unanswered above every parliament session, every royal council, every foreign negotiation, and now, in your twilight, silence is no longer enough. The line of succession is murky. You left no children, no spouse, no siblings still living. The Tudor blood is nearly extinct. The crown could leap anywhere, to a cousin, a foreign prince, or to the house you once fought to contain the Stuarts. Your advisors know who the front-runner is. James VI of Scotland, the son of Mary Stuart, the queen you executed. He's a Protestant now, educated, calculated, already a king, and despite being the son of your greatest rival, he is the most politically viable candidate. But still, you say nothing publicly. Privately? The story is different. By 1601, you've begun discreet communications with James. Your ministers, especially Robert Cecil, William's son, handle the back-channel diplomacy, carefully, quietly, always plausible deniability. You want peace in England after you're gone. You don't want civil war over your grave. So, with subtlety that defines your rule, you allow the machinery of succession to spin into motion without your name directly attached. But even as you prepare for what comes after, your present begins to crumble. The glory of the Armada victory feels distant. The pageants don't dazzle like they once did. Your progresses grow shorter. The poetry less frequent. Your body aches. Your appetite fades. You find comfort only in routine, ritual, and the remnants of your golden age. And then, the silence grows louder. By 1602, your health begins to seriously decline. You suffer from insomnia, possibly depression. You spend entire days standing motionless, refusing to eat or sleep. You speak less, sit alone for hours. Courtiers become nervous. Physicians whisper theories, but no one really knows what's wrong, just that the queen is fading. You're moved to Richmond Palace, away from the noise and expectation of court life. The corridors there are quieter, the light colder. One day you collapse. The court gathers. Bishops pray. The ladies-in-waiting hover. But you remain mostly silent, lying on cushions, refusing to take to your bed. Even now, you cling to control. You will not show weakness. You will not be seen dying. When asked if James should succeed you, you do not say his name, but you place your hand gently, symbolically, in a gesture that leaves no doubt. The final silence comes on March 24th, 1603. You die, aged 69. You have ruled for 44 years. Your death sends a ripple through the country. Bells toll. People weep in the streets. Some fear chaos. Others feel relief. All know something enormous has ended. You are buried at Westminster Abbey in the same tomb as your half-sister Mary, the 2 daughters of Henry VIII who took England in opposite directions, now resting beneath the same stone. Your motto was Semper Idem, always the same, and you lived it. You were constant. Even as the world around you changed, you remained the anchor. The myth, the queen. And now the reign of Elizabeth is over. But the age? The legend? That step's just beginning. This was your final move, shaping your end to match your reign, silent, decisive, and entirely your own. You weren't set just a queen. You were a muse, a patron, and, though no one dared say it out loud, a kind of cultural architect. The world would remember your reign not just for war or diplomacy, but for how you made England think, speak, and dream. The Elizabethan Renaissance wasn't just a happy accident. It didn't fall from the sky like summer rain. It was cultivated by your policies, your preferences, and your presence. And it began as most revolutions do, in words. The English language, during your reign, becomes something new, more alive, more elastic. You didn't just allow it to flourish, you demanded it. You wanted speeches that sparkled, letters that impressed, court pageants that enchanted. You wanted theater that wasn't just entertainment, it was a national statement. The result? A literary golden age. William Shakespeare, born a decade into your reign, becomes your nation's poet laureate in spirit, if not in title. His plays are performed at the Globe and Blackfriars, you attend his company's shows. You hear Henry V and Richard III and see yourself echoed, queens, rulers, power unbound by gender or fate. And it's not just Shakespeare. You cultivate a constellation of writers and thinkers. Christopher Marlowe, who burns twice as bright and dies too young, gives the world Dr. Faustus and the powerful drama of ambition. Edmund Spenser writes The Faerie Queen, an allegorical epic that mythologizes U.S. Gloriana, the pure and radiant ruler guiding a fallen world. John Lyly, Thomas Nashe, Ben Jonson, Thomas Kyde, their pens become swords in defense of English pride, Protestant virtue, and, always, the image of the Queen. You support them not out of whimsy, but intent. You know the stage isn't just a place for story, it's a battlefield of ideas. You regulate it tightly. No political satire, no religious controversy, but you encourage moral complexity, heroism, romance, nationalism. You turn theater into propaganda that people actually want to watch. And outside of literature, art too flourishes. Your portraits are never just paintings, they're policy. You sit for them rarely, but they're replicated and distributed across the realm. You are shown as ageless, ever virgin, surrounded by emblems, eyes for omniscience, globes for dominion, snakes for wisdom, roses for Tudor legitimacy. Your court becomes the fashion capital of Europe. The ruff becomes a national obsession. White lead face paint, despite its toxicity, becomes the beauty standard because you wear it. Your court also becomes a crucible for invention. John Dee, your advisor and mystic, pushes the boundaries of science and magic. An astrologer, mathematician, and philosopher, he coins the term British Empire and dreams of global expansion. While others dabble in superstition, Dee blends the mystical and the mechanical in service of your kingdom. Navigation, too, becomes an art form. Sir Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, Martin Frobisher, these men aren't just seafarers, they're your agents in a global race for power. They circumnavigate the globe, claim lands in your name, raid Spanish treasure ships. Exploration becomes national myth, and you are always at the center, Elizabeth, Queen of the Sea. You carefully balance nationalism with tolerance. Foreign ambassadors marvel at how educated your nobles are, how polished your court's manners. Latin is spoken fluently, philosophy is debated openly, dancing, poetry, fencing, it's not just amusement, it's training. A courtier in your England must be a warrior and a poet. But the Renaissance doesn't only exist in the royal courts or theaters of London. It spreads across the country, touching even small towns with new schools, new ideas, new languages. Printing presses flourish. Pamphlets circulate. The English Bible, once banned, becomes a household object. Still, it isn't set all light and loots. You control this renaissance carefully. You maintain the royal licensing system, ensuring no book or play goes to press without a government stamp. Censorship is strict. Sedition is punished. You allow exploration of truth, but only within the carefully drawn lines of monarchy, church, and crown. And you know how to use pageantry. Every summer, you go on progress, royal tours through your realm. These aren't vacations, they're performances. You visit noble estates, you allow them to host you in their grand halls, you make them spend enormous sums, lavish feasts, jousts, masks, all to honor your presence. They compete to impress you. They compete to outdo one another, and in doing so, they reinforce your supremacy. Each progress is a spectacle, a living play where you are the star, the heroine, the goddess. The people line the roads. They cheer, they kneel, they see their monarch not just as ruler but as symbol. This isn't just admiration, it's political theater with a national script. And it works. Under your reign, England transitions from the Protestant backwater of Europe to a rising cultural superpower. The Renaissance was already blooming on the continent, Italy, France, the Low Countries, but you make it uniquely English. You make it yours. This isn't a period of peace. Not really. There are still threats, Spain, Ireland, domestic unrest, but culturally, it's an explosion, and the shockwaves will ripple through centuries. Shakespeare will still be read in 400 years. Your image will be etched in coins, in stone, in syllabi. The Renaissance is not just something you allow, it's something you shape, stage, and star in. This was your revolution, not with swords, but with syllables. For all the glitter and grandeur of your court, for all the masks, speeches, and divine iconography, your crown doesn't shine everywhere. Across the Irish Sea, it drips with blood. From the beginning of your reign, Ireland is a problem, a stubborn one. You inherit it, like most things, partially subdued, partially ignored, partially on fire. It is technically a kingdom under English sovereignty, but the control is shallow, mostly coastal cities and garrisons. Beyond that, Gaelic lords, Catholic chieftains, a land ruled more by clans than councils. And here's the truth. No one says aloud, you don't understand Ireland. Not fully. And your advisors understand it even less. But you know what it means strategically. Ireland is England's back door. If Spain, France, or Rome want to strike you where you're weak, Ireland is their perfect staging ground. That makes it not just a rebellious territory, it makes it a liability. A threat. You begin with what seems like a reasonable strategy: English colonization, settlements, loyal Protestant nobles granted Irish lands, often forcibly taken from native chieftains. It's called plantation. In theory, it will stabilize the region. In practice, it ignites it. From the 1560s onward, you face a near-continuous cycle of rebellion. The first major flare is the Desmond rebellions, sparked by the Fitzgeralds of Munster. You crush them eventually. But the campaigns are long, expensive, and brutal. Villages are razed, crops are burned, civilians starve. You don't micromanage the tactics, but you sign the funds. You endorse the governors. And when reports return, whole counties depopulated, you look away. The rebellions don't set end. They evolve. The biggest comes in the 1590s, Tyrone's rebellion, led by Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone, and this one is different. Bigger, more organized, more dangerous. O'Neill isn't some rural bandit, he's educated, politically savvy, and trained in your own military academies. He knows how your army thinks. And he allies with Spain. Now it's no longer just rebellion, it's international war on home turf. For years, your forces slog through Ulster's forests and bogs. The war is devastating economically, politically, morally. Even your most loyal commanders write to you begging for clearer strategy, for more troops, for more silver to keep men fed and loyal. You send it, grudgingly. But you send it. In 1598, the English suffer a crushing defeat at Yellow Ford, the worst loss your army has seen in Ireland. Panic sweeps the Privy Council. Spain begins eyeing another armada, this time potentially landing in Ireland to support Tyrone. The cost of the war spirals. You send your last card, Charles Blount, Lord Mountjoy, brutal, efficient, and determined to crush the rebellion by any means necessary. And he does, but at a price. He adopts scorched earth tactics, burning villages, destroying crops, targeting food supplies. It's a campaign of starvation and terror, and it breaks Tyrone's forces not just in battle, but in body and spirit. By 1603, Tyrone surrenders. The war is over, you win. But what's left behind isn't peace, it's silence. Ireland is devastated, whole regions depopulated. The famine that follows kills more than the battles ever did. English control is now firmer, but at a horrifying cost. And no matter how poets sing of Gloriana, no matter how noble the portraits or divine the language, this chapter is written in blood and fire. And here's what's rarely said: you never set foot in Ireland. You rule it through letters, reports, and governors. You sign the budgets, approve the titles, issue the proclamations, but you never walk the land you claim. Still, the legacy is yours. Your reign sets the stage for centuries of English-Irish conflict, for centuries of rebellion and repression. You plant the seeds, quite literally, that grow into future wars. It's not what people remember when they think of you, but it should be. Because you weren't just the Virgin Queen, you were a queen of conquest. This was the cost of your crown, the battles you never saw, but always owned. When you look out from the battlements of your English castles, you don't see oceans, but your ambition does. While your enemies squabble over land and alliances in Europe, you start thinking bigger, beyond the continent, beyond old maps, toward what your subjects are just beginning to call the New World. Spain has already claimed vast territories across the Americas. Portugal has carved out Brazil, France is building footholds along North America's rivers, but England? You arrive late to the table, and there's a reason for that. The truth is, your England isn't rich. Not like Spain, you don't have fleets of treasure galleons bringing home gold. You don't have a standing army or a global navy, but you do have something else: bold men with ships, a thirst for glory, and absolutely no fear of provoking an empire. So you back them, not officially, not publicly, but quietly, strategically. You give them licenses. You call them privateers. To Spain, they're pirates. To you, they're your sharpest tools. Men like Sir Francis Drake, a former slave trader turned Seahawk, begin plundering the Caribbean, raiding Spanish ports, intercepting treasure fleets. In 1577, you greenlight his most audacious mission yet, a circumnavigation of the globe. It takes nearly 3 years. He survives hurricanes, mutinies, starvation, and ambushes, but he returns in 1580 with ships stuffed with treasure, more gold and silver than the crown earns in years of taxes. You greet him in person, you board his ship, the Golden Hind, and in a theatrical flourish that sends a message across Europe, you knight him on the deck. Spain explodes with fury. Drake becomes a symbol. You didn't just condone piracy, you made it policy. And yet you're not content with stealing riches. You want to plant flags. Enter Sir Walter Raleigh, a court favorite, all flair and ambition. In 1584, he receives a royal patent to establish colonies in North America. He names the land Virginia after you, the Virgin Queen. The first settlement attempt on Roanoke Island fails spectacularly. Disease, starvation, and native resistance wipe it out. The second famously disappears entirely. The lost colony becomes one of history's great mysteries. But the intention is clear, this is just the beginning. Under your reign, England doesn't just dip its toes into the Atlantic, it begins building the mindset of empire. Explorers sail under your banner. Cartographers sketch coastlines with English names. Adventurers return with stories of strange lands, new peoples, riches untold. And while the early attempts at colonization are messy, costly, and often disastrous, the cultural foundation is set. England has a claim to the world. And Elizabeth is the mother of that claim. You encourage it. Carefully. You don't throw royal money at colonies, not yet, but you allow men to dream, investors to speculate, and your name to fly above distant shores. You understand something subtle but powerful. Let others pay for the mistakes. Let the crown take credit for the success. And there's another layer to this expansion: ideology. You present colonization as a Protestant mission, a divine counter to Catholic conquest. Where Spain brings the cross and the sword, you bring civilization, English language, English laws, English religion. This narrative becomes doctrine, and it's dangerous. It paves the way for justifying future imperialism, one that says expansion is not about greed, but about destiny, about God's work, and it starts with your name. But let's not romanticize it too much. The early English presence in the Americas also brings violence, disease, and dispossession. You don't live to see the full impact, but it begins here in your reign under your letters patent. Even now, as you preside over masques and ceremonies in London, somewhere across the ocean, men are planting flags with your crest, carving your initials into trees, and declaring lands you've never seen to be English soil. That SEP's power. Real power. You didn't cross oceans. You didn't sail the ships. But you made it possible. This was your reach, not just across the realm, but across the world. They never stopped asking. From the day you took the throne to the final weeks of your life, the same question circled you like a vulture: when will you marry? And your answer was always the same. You didn't give one. You were a queen with no king, a monarch with no consort, and in a world where power passed through bloodlines, that made you an anomaly, an unnerving, fascinating, unprecedented anomaly. But make no mistake, you didn't reject marriage out of piety or solitude. You turned it into a diplomatic game, one you played better than anyone. From your first days on the throne, the European courts lined up suitors like chess pieces, kings, princes, dukes, each hoping to bind England through you. Your first serious contender was the most obvious: Philip II of Spain, widower of your sister Mary. He offered marriage within weeks of her death. You delayed, you flattered, then you declined. Not because Philip was unworthy, he ruled half the known world, but because marrying him would have meant surrendering your independence and your Protestant reforms to a Catholic monarch whose ships and soldiers loomed over you. Instead, you kept your suitors close, without letting them close. You considered Eric of Sweden, Archduke Charles of Austria, even a French prince or two. Each one brought promises, alliances, dowries, peace treaties, and each time you said just enough to keep them hopeful, but not enough to seal the deal. To them, it was frustrating. To you, it was perfect. You used your marriageability as a tool, a lever, a carrot dangled before nations with larger armies and bigger navies. It bought you time, options, space to maneuver. While others were trapped by royal marriages, you were free to pivot, postpone, or withdraw entirely. But no courtship caused more scandal or speculation than the one that didn't come from abroad, but from within. Robert Dudley. You knew him since childhood. You elevated him early, naming him Master of the Horse, giving him rare access to your inner chambers and your daily presence. He was handsome, ambitious, and adored by many and hated by just as many more. Whispers began almost immediately. And when his wife, Amy Robsart, was found dead at the bottom of a staircase in 1560, her neck broken, the court erupted. It was ruled an accident, but the rumors never stopped. That you were lovers, that he killed her, that you would marry him now. You didn't set. Whether out of political calculation or personal guilt, you knew marrying Dudley would collapse your support among the nobles and the public. It would make you vulnerable, diminished, and seen as governed by passion. So once again, you stepped back, kept him close, but not too close. He remained at your side for decades. You wrote him letters filled with affection. You called him my eyes. But you never made him king. And you never gave England an heir. The pressure didn't ease with age. It intensified. Parliament begged you over and over to marry. They argued not just for love or alliance, but for succession. Without a child, the kingdom would fall into uncertainty. Potential civil war. Another war of the roses. But you refused to let your womb become a battleground. You chose symbolism over succession. You transformed your unmarried state into a moral high ground. You declared yourself wed to your people. I am already bound unto a husband, you told Parliament, which is the kingdom of England. You didn't just say it. You became it. Your image, carefully controlled, cast you as the Virgin Queen. Divine, pure, elevated above human desire. In a world where women were often viewed as weak, you made virginity power. You made independence sacred. Even your portraits played into it. One painting shows you with a sieve, a classical symbol of chastity. Another, the rainbow portrait, shows you with eyes and ears sewn into her gown, the all-seeing ruler, above reproach, above temptation. But let's not pretend this came without cost. You lived surrounded by people, but often alone. You cultivated love, but never allowed it to flower. You inspired poets, but never let them write your heart. And while other monarchs built dynasties, you built a myth, one so flawless, so complete, it left no space for something as messy as marriage. It wasn't set that you couldn't sit marry. It sets that you chose not to. Because a queen married to a man could be questioned. A queen married to a country could not. This was your masterstroke, not a crown, but the absence of a ring. By the final decade of your reign, you are more than just a monarch. You are an institution. Your image, your rituals, your court, everything about you is designed to communicate strength, clarity, permanence. And yet, behind the velvet curtains, your last great favorite reminds you of something you try hard to forget. You are still human. His name is Robert Devereux, 2nd Earl of Essex. Dashing, charismatic, restless, reckless. The stepson of Robert Dudley, no less. He enters your orbit in the late 1580s, just as Dudley exits this world. You are in your mid-50s. Essex is in his early 20s. The age gap doesn't matter. Not in this court. He becomes your confidant, your excitement, your emotional tether. But here sits the problem. Essex isn't set Dudley. Dudley understood the game. He knew how to flatter, to wait, to bend without breaking. Essex, he bends for no one. You promote him fast. He becomes Master of the Horse, a member of the Privy Council, and eventually commander in military campaigns. But he wants more. Always more. In 1596, you send him to capture Cadiz in Spain. He wins, he returns triumphant. And in that victory, a dangerous new thought is born in him that he could lead not just armies, but government. He begins clashing with your most trusted advisors, especially Robert Cecil, son of your late mentor William Cecil. Essex loathes Cecil's careful politics. He wants action, glory, power. You watch the feud quietly, hoping it will cool. It doesn't set. Instead, Essex grows bolder. In 1599, you give him command of the most difficult military campaign of the era, the 9 Years' War in Ireland against Hugh O'Neill. You hope he'll bring it to a close. He doesn't set. Instead of crushing O'Neill, he negotiates with him without your permission. Then, fearing your wrath, he abandons his army and returns to England. Worse, he bursts into your private chambers unannounced, catching you without your makeup, wig, or royal mask. It's a violation. A personal betrayal. A political disaster. You respond swiftly. He's stripped of his offices, banished from court. His monopoly rights, his sources of income, are revoked. His fortune crumbles, and so does his pride. And here sits the thing Essex forgets. You sifter not just his queen, you stir also his judge. And you do not tolerate rebellion. But Essex, can't let go. In February 1601, he raises a small force in London, hoping to incite a popular uprising. He believes the people will rise for him. He believes the nobles will rally. He believes, perhaps most fatally, that you will forgive him. None of that happens. His rebellion collapses in hours. His men are arrested. His house is stormed. He surrenders and is tried for treason. The evidence is overwhelming. And then the moment comes you hoped would never arrive. You sign the death warrant. This isn't just another nobleman, not just another traitor. This was the last man you allowed to touch your emotions, the last courtier who saw the woman behind the queen. On February 25, 1601, Essex is executed at the Tower of London, beheaded on Tower Green, reserved for those of high rank. You receive the news in silence. No one sees your grief, but your servants notice you wear black more often, that you drift through Whitehall with a shadow in your eyes, that you grow quieter, more withdrawn. Because with Essex dies something else, your capacity for romantic hope. After Essex, the pageants feel hollow, the flattery less sweet, the court becomes colder, more bureaucratic. The poetic age doesn't end, but it dims. You do not allow another favorite to rise, not like him. And as for Essex-Sipp's memory, you lock it away. The people remember him as a tragic hero. Some say he sent you a ring, a token you once gave him pleading for mercy, but that it was intercepted by enemies. There's no proof, only legend, and you allow it to remain legend. Because you understand the value of a story. You always have. This was the cost of being loved, when love turns to ambition. By the early 1600s, you are still queen. But not as you were. You walk the same halls, sleep beneath the same gilded ceilings, sit on the same throne, but the court has changed. And so have you. The fires that once danced in your eyes when you debated your counsel, when you sparred with suitors, when you ruled with sheer force of mind, now flicker lower, steadier, and more cautious. You're in your late 60s, unmarried, childless, surrounded by ghosts. Robert Dudley, William Cecil, Francis Walsingham, Francis Drake, John Dee, even Essex for all his betrayal. One by one, the men who helped you build the Elizabethan world have disappeared, leaving you in the halls you once ruled like a goddess, now more alone than ever. Your court still sparkles on the surface. The music plays, the masks unfold, the nobility bow and flatter and flirt. But it isn't the same. The younger nobles know you're aging. Some are already currying favor with your suspected successor, James VI of Scotland, even though no formal announcement has been made. They see what's coming, and you see that they see. You never name James publicly, you never say the words, but you allow the wheels to turn. Quiet meetings, secret letters. Robert Cecil, now your chief advisor, manages the process with ruthless grace, just like his father would have. It's the one thing you allow to happen beyond your control. The rest, you cling to as tightly as ever. You still wake early, still attend council, still read dispatches, still sign papers, but it's slower now. You delegate more, rest more, think more. You spend hours in solitude, staring into the fire. Sometimes you go days without speaking. The silence settles like snow on the court. Your servants don't know what to say. They whisper to each other, "Is she ill? Is she slipping?" You don't tell them. Because you know something they don't, you are preparing for the end, not just your death, but the end of an era. The Elizabethan age is already becoming legend. Poets write of Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the monarch who tamed men, crushed invaders, and made a once humble kingdom roar. But you know the price. The years have worn you down. The makeup, once armor, now cracks beneath your fingers. The gowns are heavy. The court is tired. You've ruled longer than anyone imagined. But even queens are mortal. You begin refusing food. You grow thin. Your teeth ache. Your hair is almost entirely gone, hidden beneath red wigs. You wear black more often in mourning for friends, for lost time, for yourself. In March 1603, you fall ill at Richmond Palace. The courtiers circle like stars around a dying sun. Physicians gather, priests wait, but you won't take to your bed. You refuse to name your illness. You refuse to rest. You lie on cushions on the floor. You turn your face to the wall. You remain silent for hours, days. When they ask about James, you don't say his name. You simply move your hand. That's enough. You know it's time. But you won't speak your last words in weakness. You've spent a lifetime controlling the narrative, the image, the perception. You won't break that streak now. And so the winter court stands still. A candlelit silence draped in velvet and ritual. A kingdom holding its breath. You, Gloriana, once the flame at the center of the world, now slowly flickering out. This is the last chapter of a reign that redefined monarchy. Not with heirs, not with marriage, but with endurance. This was your final season where everything slowed but nothing truly ended. It is March 24th, 1603. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the kingdom is already shifting. You lie motionless on the cushions at Richmond Palace, surrounded by silence, no royal trumpets, no weeping ministers, no last dramatic words for posterity, just you in the dark, barely breathing. And then you don't sit. After 69 years of life, 44 of them on the throne, you are gone. The last Tudor, the last daughter of Henry VIII, the last queen of your line. But even in death, you control the message. When the news reaches London, it moves like a chill wind, the queen is dead. People gather, some kneel, some cry, some remain silent, unsure what comes next. You left no child, no declared heir, but your ministers, those few you truly trusted, already know what to do. The secret correspondence with James VI of Scotland, years in the making, now becomes action. Riders gallop north, messengers wake nobles. England will not fracture. The crown will pass quietly, seamlessly to a new house. The House of Stuart. You never met James, but you understood him. Protestant, literate, politically astute. The son of Mary, Queen of Scots, the woman you executed, and yet the one you chose to carry your legacy forward. And here's the irony, though you claimed your rule was guided by semper ideum, always the same, your final act is a massive transformation. You end one dynasty and begin another. You unite two kingdoms under one crown. You turn England from a Tudor inheritance into a British vision. And you do it without ever speaking aloud. That's Sepp's power, silent, deliberate, lasting. Your funeral is as elaborate as your legend. The procession begins weeks later under a leaden April sky. Your coffin, covered in a velvet pall and topped with an effigy wearing your crown, is drawn through the streets of London on a massive wooden hearse. Thousands line the streets, peasants, merchants, nobility, all watching the woman who ruled them for nearly half a century pass by one last time. You are buried in Westminster Abbey, beneath the same stone as your half-sister Mary, the Catholic queen who once imprisoned you. The inscription on your tomb speaks not of rivalry, but unity. Partners in throne and grave. But history remembers the truth. You outshone her. You outlasted them all. And now, something extraordinary begins. Under James, England becomes Britain. Colonies expand. The ideas seeded during your reign, global trade, naval dominance, cultural identity, begin to mature. You didn't start the empire, but you lit the first match. The glow of your court becomes the blueprint for monarchy across Europe. Writers who lived in your reign, Shakespeare, Spencer, Marlowe, become immortal. Their works, written in your shadow, will define English literature for centuries. The name Elizabethan becomes more than a time period. It becomes a brand, a world, a weight. And then there steps you. Your image, painted and printed, carved and quoted, lives on long after your bones are dust. You become a symbol not of femininity or virginity or even monarchy, but of control, of presence, of survival. You were not born to inherit. You were not meant to rule, but you did. And in the end, it wasn't your heirs that carried your name forward, it was your example. This was the death of a dynasty, and the birth of a legacy. You are dead, but your reign has only just begun. Because what dies in the body can live forever in the story. And your story, it was ready for immortality the moment your heart stopped. You set been building it for decades. You curated your portraits like propaganda. You gave the public poetry instead of proclamations. You wrapped your rule in allegory, iconography, and rituals so rich, it might as well have been gospel. Now that you're gone, the legend gets only bigger, brighter, cleaner. They call you Gloriana. They call you Estrella, the virgin goddess of justice. They call you the Virgin Queen, chosen by God, married to a nation, immune to sin, beyond corruption. And people believe it. Because it's easier to remember you as a goddess than a politician. Easier to frame your reign as golden than to reckon with its gray shadows like Ireland, famine, execution, censorship, and plague. Those things don't fit in the stained glass window version of you, so they get left out. Instead, you sit gray-framed in pageantry. The queen who defeated the Spanish Armada, the queen who defied the Pope, the queen who made poets weep and kings tremble, the queen who danced through decades without marrying, without aging, without faltering. History loves symmetry, it loves clarity, and you, Elizabeth, gave it both, so much so that the Elizabethan myth becomes a tool for every monarch who follows. James I, your successor, leans heavily on your image in the early years of his reign. He doesn't want to be seen as the Scottish outsider who took your throne, so he paints himself as your heir, your chosen one, the peaceful continuation of your golden age. Later, Charles would invoke your strength as a way to bolster his own crumbling authority. Even during the English Civil War, both sides invoke your name, one as the perfect queen, the other as proof that monarchy could work if only done like you. Centuries later, Queen Victoria is likened to you. So is Queen Elizabeth II. You become the benchmark, the prototype, the ideal. Not just for queens, but for power itself. And the myth travels. In America, as British colonies struggle for independence, your name is still whispered with reverence. Virginia, the colony named in your honor, becomes a foundational part of the New World. Gloriana may be gone, but the empire she sparked continues. Your portraits hang in museums. Your speeches are quoted in history books. Your reign is taught not just as fact, but as fable. And the myth isn't accidental. You understood, better than anyone, that a queen must be more than mortal to last, so you used everything you had, language, fashion, poetry, ceremony, to make yourself not just remembered, but unforgettable. And it worked. Because centuries later, your life isn't just studied, it's performed. In films, on stage, in novels, in opera, you are reimagined as lover, warrior, sorceress, saint. You are Cate Blanchett and Judi Dench. You are Bette Davis and Helen Mirren. You are quotes half remembered and costumes worn on Halloween. You are history's power-dressed matriarch, standing above time, untouched by the dust of death. You never had children. But your lineage lives on in symbols. In the crown. In the language. In every strong woman who walks into a room and doesn't apologize for being there. That sep's the legacy you left. This was your metamorphosis, not into myth, but into model. You ruled, you died, you became legend. But legends cast long shadows, and yours stretches far beyond the 17th century. What follows your death isn't just mourning, it's adjustment. The court that once trembled under your gaze now scrambles to redefine itself. No more ruffs and jeweled masks, no more virgin queen. The court under James the Fine is more masculine, more Scottish, and frankly less dazzling. Your style of rule, deliberate, symbolic, emotionally manipulative when necessary, is replaced by something more legalistic. Less performance, more paperwork. But people can forget you, they don't want to. Because life after Gloriana feels colder, dimmer, more mortal. And it shows. The early years of James's reign are littered with comparisons. His speeches are measured against yours. His mannerisms mocked for lacking your flair. His excesses scorned by those who remember your austerity. Even when James unites the crowns of England and Scotland, forming the Kingdom of Great Britain, it doesn't feel like an evolution. It feels like an administrative change. You are theater. He is policy. And the people miss the stage. Your name becomes a kind of national shorthand for greatness. Politicians invoke the Elizabethan age whenever they want to sell nostalgia. Writers and artists begin depicting your court as the moment England became England. Even William Camden, one of your own chroniclers, starts polishing the version of you that history will inherit, virtuous, decisive, the queen who restored true religion and ruled over a golden age. Even your flaws get rebranded. Your refusal to marry? A sign of divine independence. Your execution of Mary, Queen of Scots? A tragic necessity. Your suppression of Irish rebellion, a footnote if mentioned at all. Reality softens in the afterglow, and the farther from your death the world moves, the brighter the image becomes. During the Enlightenment, philosophers cite your reign as proof that monarchy can be rational and efficient. During the Victorian era, your legend is resurrected in full force. Queen Victoria, seeking to secure her own place in history, draws constant parallels between herself and you, two queens ruling alone, forging empires, commanding loyalty without kings beside them. In the 20th century, as the British Empire reaches its zenith, you're framed not just as a monarch, but as the spiritual founder of global Britain. Textbooks call your reign the start of the English Renaissance. The Armada defeat becomes a national origin myth. Your name becomes synonymous with victory, diplomacy, and destiny. And the term Elizabethan? It stops being a time period. It becomes a standard. Even when another Elizabeth II ascends the throne in 1952, the world instantly draws the connection. Newspaper headlines declare the beginning of a second Elizabethan age, not because of anything the new queen had yet done, but because of what you had already become. Your legacy becomes less about truth and more about usefulness. Need a symbol of strong womanhood? A beacon of Protestant nationalism? A gold standard for diplomacy under pressure? The answer is always the same: Elizabeth. And in this glow, this carefully cultivated, endlessly replicated glow, you remain alive, not just in books and films, but in expectations. People expect their queens to have your calm. Expect their politicians to have your rhetoric. Expect their leaders to rule like Gloriana. It sets a high bar, but you set it. And even now, centuries later, the world still reaches for your shadow like it's sunlight. This was your afterglow, not a fading light, but a permanent radiance. You left no children, no daughter to wear your crown, no son to guard your throne. But what you left behind was more dangerous than blood. You left an idea, and ideas outlive dynasties. For centuries, women would walk through the world looking to power and asking, what if I didn't have to play by the rules? What if I made my own? And when they looked for proof it could be done, they saw you. The virgin queen, the unmarried monarch, the ruler who bowed to no king. You redefined what female power looked like, not by imitating men, but by making your femininity political, strategic, mythic. And other women noticed. Fast forward 2 centuries, and another queen rises in your wake, Queen Victoria. Not as theatrical as you, not as witty, but no less determined. She rules longer, expands farther, and just like you, she turns her womanhood into a symbol, mother of empire, matriarch of morality. She studies your reign, she references your legacy. Her advisors call her a second Elizabeth, and she does nothing to stop them. Later, Queen Elizabeth II inherits your name and your nation. When she's crowned in 1953, the press calls it the new Elizabethan age. Not because her policies mirror yours, hers are constitutional, yours were autocratic, but because the emotional weight of the name Elizabeth still signals strength, dignity, and longevity. But your flame doesn't just burn on thrones. It catches in pens, pulpits, and parliaments, in women who write, lead, govern, not because they claim divine right, but because they no longer need permission to speak. Mary Wollstonecraft, writing A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, calls for education and agency not just for queens, but for all women. Susan B. Anthony, fighting for suffrage in America, references your reign as a rebuke to the idea that politics is a man's game. Emmeline Pankhurst, leading protests in the streets of London, declares that women have always held power. Just look at Elizabeth Tudor. You become the exception that proves the rule until you become the example that rewrites it. And in every generation, another woman reaches for your reflection. Not because you were perfect. You weren't set. You could be ruthless, vain, paranoid. You silenced dissent. You wielded propaganda. You made your enemies disappear. But you also did something few dared. You stayed in power. You owned it. And not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, but as yourself. You didn't lean on a marriage alliance. You didn't marry into power. You were the power. And that legacy is intoxicating. So when Margaret Thatcher walks into Parliament, all iron and no apologies, they compare her to you. When Angela Merkel governs Europe with cool calculus, they say you would have understood her. When Kamala Harris stands behind the presidential podium in the US and says, I may be the first woman in this office, but I will not be the last. Your name doesn't come up, but your shadow is there, standing just behind her. Not because you paved the way, but because you proved it could be done. Even in fiction, you linger. Every woman monarch, empress, general, space queen, or sci-fi sovereign carries a little bit of your DNA. In every drama where a woman commands a room, holds her own, or survives impossible odds, they're drawing from your playbook whether they know it or not. You showed the world that leadership didn't have to come from masculinity. It could come from strategy, from presence, from silence and steel. You weren't just a ruler. You were the blueprint. And long after your death, your fire didn't die, it scattered. Sparks flying out into the centuries, finding new fuel. This was your inheritance, not passed by blood, but by example. Let's be honest, ruling as a woman in the 16th century wasn't just difficult, it was nearly impossible. No precedent, no blueprint, no safety net. A queen was expected to marry, produce heirs, defer to male counsel, stay within her lane. You did none of that. But you didn't succeed by luck or brute force, you built a system, a delicate dazzling machine powered by spectacle, symbol, and strategy. You didn't just rule England, you performed it. Let's start with the pageantry. Every moment you appeared in public, it was a show. Your coronation in 1559 was more than a ritual. It was a political statement. You rode through the streets in a gilded carriage, the crowd cheering, the air heavy with incense and roses. You wore cloth of gold, jewels threaded through your hair, and beneath it all, steel composure. It wasn't just about beauty, it was about dominance, a visual language your people could read from a distance. This woman is power incarnate. And you kept that performance going for 4 decades. Every progress your royal tours through the countryside was theater. You let nobles host you at absurd expense, building entire temporary palaces just to flatter your ego. They weren't just trying to impress you, they were trying to stay relevant. Because if Elizabeth smiled on your estate, you were safe. If she frowned, you were finished. That's how you kept your nobles loyal, not through fear, but through access. You didn't let them rise too high, you didn't let them grow bored, you made them dance, literally at your masques and balls, always circling you, always watching for favor. But the performance wasn't limited to events. It lived in your image. Your official portraits were carefully stage managed, no informal sketches, no off-the-cuff likenesses. Each one was a carefully curated symbol, your hand resting on a globe, eyes painted larger than life, serpents of wisdom coiled beneath your fingers, rainbows blooming behind your shoulders. You didn't age in these paintings, not because you were vain, though you had every right to be, but because aging meant weakness, mortality, and queens in your world didn't crack or wrinkle. They glowed. Even your fashion was strategy. You wore white to symbolize virginity and purity. Pearls, hundreds of them, symbolized chastity, wisdom, and your connection to the moon. Your ruffs grew larger every year, framing your face like a halo. And your wigs? Elaborate, towering, perfectly arranged. They were shields, armor made of aesthetics. But pageantry only works if people are watching. So you controlled propaganda with the same precision you applied to war. You censored plays, you monitored pamphlets, you licensed every book printed in England, you didn't just encourage loyalty, you policed it. When poets praised you, they found their careers soaring. When pamphleteers crossed the line, whether political or personal, they found themselves silenced, imprisoned, or worse, and still people adored you. Because your propaganda didn't just elevate you, it elevated England. You transformed the narrative. England wasn't just a country surviving without a king, it was a chosen nation, thriving under a woman whose virtue made her more than mortal. Your speeches reinforced this. You rarely spoke in Parliament, but when you did, your words cut like glass. You spoke softly, deliberately, often in Latin when it mattered most, just to remind the room that you could outthink every man there. Your Tilbury speech, delivered in armor before your troops as the Spanish Armada loomed, sealed your myth. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. The crowd roared, England roared, history roared. But here sets the secret behind all of it, the gears beneath the gold. You knew how fragile power was. You knew how quickly love turned into treason. You knew how thin the crown sat on your red wig, so you never stopped performing. You never let your guard drop. You never really let them see you. Because in your world, vulnerability wasn't human, it was fatal. This wasn't set just reign. It was resistance. It was rule by illusion. Rule by spectacle. And it worked. Better than anyone expected. This was your machine, polished, controlled, awe-inspiring. A queen alone was supposed to be powerless. That was the theory. But in your case, being alone made you untouchable. No husband to influence you. No son to succeed you. No king to overshadow you. Which meant that every man who served you walked a tightrope, one foot in loyalty, the other in self-preservation. And you liked it that way. Let's begin with William Cecil, your first and most trusted advisor. He served you from the very beginning, your principal secretary, your Lord Treasurer, your human firewall. You called him my spirit. When others pushed for rash action, revenge, marriage, war, Cecil urged caution, patience, process. He didn't flatter you, he challenged you, and you trusted him because of it. Cecil kept the wheels turning for 4 decades, and when age finally wore him down, his son Robert Cecil stepped in, less warm, more cold-blooded, but just as effective. He negotiated with foreign powers, spied on your enemies, and carefully managed the transition to James V. You let him. You weren't sentimental, you were strategic. Then there was Francis Walsingham, your spy master. Cold, precise, ruthless. He ran the most sophisticated intelligence network in Europe. His agents intercepted letters in beer barrels, cracked codes, staged betrayals, and watched every whisper in every cathedral, pub, and palace. He was the reason you survived dozens of assassination plots and uprisings. He kept you alive with secrets. You never gave him titles or lavish estates. You gave him authority. That was enough. Then, the favorites. Robert Dudley, your childhood friend, your confidant, maybe more, maybe not. You called him Sweet Robin, he called you my queen. You elevated him, empowered him, and when his wife died under suspicious circumstances, you didn't marry him. Not because you didn't care, but because you knew it would destroy you politically. You loved him, but you chose the crown. Then came Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex. You raised him like a son, maybe a surrogate for the family you never had. He grew arrogant, impulsive. He challenged your judgment, defied your orders, and eventually tried to overthrow you. You signed his death warrant with a steady hand. The men around you were never just men, they were tools, weapons, mirrors. And you studied each one. You rewarded loyalty, lavishly. You punished disloyalty, publicly. You kept them guessing. Always. You knew how to manage egos, how to give just enough favor to keep them hungry, but never enough to feel secure. It was your way of maintaining the upper hand. Because even in your closest relationships, there was a rule you never broke. Never let them feel like they had you. Some feared you outright. Foreign envoys wrote of your sharp tongue and sharper memory. You could humiliate a man with a single sentence and make him thank you for the honor. At court, a glance could mean promotion or exile. You once kept a nobleman waiting 3 years to be knighted simply because he presumed it too soon. And yet, they stayed. Because serving you was power. Being near you meant influence. A whisper in your ear could move armies, shift alliances, alter the course of kingdoms. Even those who hated you had to respect you. And here's the secret most never saw: you needed these men. Not emotionally, but logistically. You couldn't fight battles, you couldn't sail ships, you couldn't sit in every council room at once. But you could choose who did. So you did, and you did it better than any king. This was your court, a network of men strong enough to serve you, but never strong enough to challenge you. By now, your bones have long since turned to dust. But your story, it seeps everywhere. In paintings, in poems, in operas, history books, political speeches, and Hollywood blockbusters. There are statues of you standing across continents, ships named in your honor, streets, schools, entire states carrying your mark. And what sips remarkable is not that you said you're remembered, it's that's how. Because unlike most monarchs, you didn't just leave behind policies, you left behind a persona, and it was built to last. Let's start with the obvious, the portraits. They still hang in palaces, galleries, and textbooks, but they were never about realism. They weren't snapshots of who you were, they were blueprints for who you wanted to be remembered as. The Armada portrait, for example, you stand triumphant, your hand on the globe, the wreckage of the Spanish Armada reflected in the background like a divine afterthought. You don't age, you don't soften, you command. Then there's the rainbow portrait, more allegory than likeness. Your gown is embroidered with eyes and ears, symbolizing your omnipresence. A serpent coils along your arm, wisdom wrapped in elegance. You hold a rainbow, standing at the center of a divine storm, as if even nature bends to your will. That sets not vanity, that sets branding. And it worked. Even centuries later, those images define what royal presence looks like. They've been copied, parodied, reinterpreted. Every monarch since you has tried in some way to recapture the balance you struck between awe and intimacy, power and restraint. But the images were just the beginning. Your life became literature. Shakespeare, in the last decade of your reign, crafts historical dramas where queens are clever, resilient, tragic, and politically razor-sharp. Sound familiar? The crowd may see Cleopatra, Portia, or Lady Macbeth, but they hear echoes of you in every line. You don't just appear in fiction, you become fiction. Over the centuries, you sit reinvented again and again. In the 1939 film, The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, you're Bette Davis, sharp-tongued, imperious, and burning with tragic romance. In the 1998 epic Elizabeth, you're Cate Blanchett, transformed from nervous teenager to steel-clad icon, reborn as a living deity. In opera, you become Bellini's tormented queen in Roberto Devereux, singing your heartbreak on candlelit stages across Europe. In theater, you're everything from a Shakespearean heroine to a one-woman show commanding, calculating, heartbroken, glorious. Each version is different. Each version is you. Even your death becomes theater. Your final days, sitting motionless on the floor, refusing to go to bed, wasting away in silence, are recounted not just as fact, but as drama, tragic, heroic, poetic. Why? Because your life demands performance. It always did. And then there's your physical legacy. You're entombed in Westminster Abbey, beneath a white stone monument that declares your greatness in Latin. Your half-sister Mary lies beneath you, ironic perhaps, considering she once tried to erase you. But you're not buried beside a husband, not a child, not even a favorite. Just your crown. And that sits fitting. You always belong to England first. Your name is stamped on coins, engraved into silver, etched in documents that survived fire, war, and regime change. You became a watermark on the nation itself. Even your era became a symbol. The Elizabethan age is shorthand for everything golden: art, exploration, identity, invention. When people say they want to return to glory days, 9 times out of 10, they're reaching for your shadow. You didn't just survive. You became the measure. The queen they compare every queen to. You're not just etched in history, you're embedded in it. This was your echo, not faded, but amplified by time. 400 years have passed. Empires have risen and fallen. Thrones have been lost, reclaimed, and diluted into ceremony. But your name, Elizabeth, still carries weight, still stirs awe, still starts arguments. And so we arrive here. Not at your death, but at your judgment. Because every ruler is judged not just by their victories or mistakes, but by what outlasts them. And you are complicated. Let's start with what they got right. You held England together at a time when it could have shattered. When religious wars were tearing Europe apart, you found a compromise not perfect, but durable. You didn't persecute Protestants like Mary, nor did you plunge into Puritanism. You chose moderation and made it a national identity. You outmaneuvered your enemies. Spain, France, the Pope, your own parliament, you danced through them all without breaking rhythm. You didn't have the largest army or deepest coffers, but you had a mind like a steel trap. You made patience a weapon. You elevated England's SIP status. At the start of your reign, England was a second-rate kingdom. By the time you died, it was a cultural powerhouse, a maritime contender, a nation with a voice the world could no longer ignore. You left no heir and still avoided a civil war. That alone is a political miracle. But greatness doesn't mean perfection. Let's not forget your hands weren't set clean. You executed Mary, Queen of Scots. Maybe you had to, but the act left a bloodstain on your myth no matter how finely it was woven into the narrative of national security. You waged a brutal war in Ireland. Your forces burned villages, starved civilians, and depopulated entire regions. The scars of that campaign didn't vanish, they festered, for generations. You wielded censorship with surgical precision. Playwrights, pamphleteers, philosophers, none were truly free. You didn't just govern with power, you governed with paranoia. You weaponized image. You blurred the line between ruler and symbol so thoroughly that even you, in your final days, seemed unsure of where Elizabeth Tudor ended and Gloriana began. You were isolated, intimidating. You built a kingdom around yourself and then stood at its center alone. But here's the truth. No one else could have done what you did. Not as a woman. Not in that century. Not surrounded by that many enemies. You survived when you weren't supposed to. You reigned when no one thought you could. You led not through inheritance, but through intellect. And while history has given many kings praise for doing less, it never gave you the luxury of simplicity. So how do we judge you? Not as a saint, not as a villain, but as something far rarer, a sovereign who understood power in all its shades. Who understood that survival is its own form of genius. That legacy isn't built by accident. And that sometimes ruling means sacrificing every part of yourself, even your heart, for the sake of the crown. You were never anyone's wife, never anyone's mother, but you were, indisputably, England's queen. And more than that, you still are. This is your final truth, not whispered, not mythologized, but earned. This is your life as Elizabeth I.